Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Quicksilver. I'll be your host for today. I'm used to waking up on the radio saying good morning, good morning. But it's not morning time. We're in the afternoon right now, depending on where you're watching us from. And we're streaming this, of course, on 92Q and all of our digital platforms. But tonight's discussion is a much needed one. It'll be very informational. But most importantly, I'm a firm believer that it's okay not to be okay. When you're not okay, it's okay to have a real conversation around it. And always say, get the help that you deserve, not just that you need, but that you deserve. With that being said, we call this Minorities in Mental Health, caring for our veterans with PTSD. But like I've been saying on the radio all week, this is not just for veterans. Anybody who wants to be a part of this conversation, please feel free to share this link. If you know anybody in your family, friends, or coworkers that are dealing with anything when it comes to mental health, please share this on your Instagram, on your Facebook, because we want to get as many people as possible joining in tonight to this amazing conversation. If you don't mind, I now want to start by introducing our panelists. I'm a gentleman, so I'm going to go with ladies first. Let me start with, I'm going to go at how I see you on my screen, so no rhyme or reason behind who's first and last. But Dr. Paula Smith-Benson, welcome to tonight's panel. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. And you're right, this is a very important conversation, and it's really a privilege to be here. So I'll just introduce myself, just share a few things with our audience. So I am Major Paula Smith-Benson, United States Air Force retired, and I currently serve as a certified peer specialist at the VA Maryland healthcare system. I served in the Air Force from 1989 to 2009. I deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom. And nice. I am a veteran that is living with a mental health diagnosis. And I'm also very, very thankful that I was appointed by Governor Westmore last year. And I am sit in the consumer seat on the Behavioral Health Care Access and Treatment Board. So giving a voice to Marylanders that either have a substance misuse disorder or a mental health challenge. So I just want to let you all know is recovery is not just possible, but we do recover. So thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely, Dr. Paula Smith-Benson. I'm giving you a virtual applause right now, virtually. Up next, another young lady on this panel by the name of Joyce King. Joyce King, welcome to tonight's show.
Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Joyce King. Like Dr. Smith-Benson, I am also an Air Force veteran, namely a Master Sergeant King. And so I served about 16 years in the Air Force. So it's always a pleasure to see a fellow sister, in arms and everything. I am the program director for the Staff Sergeant Parker Gordon Fox Veteran Suicide Prevention Program out of Sheppard Pratt. I'm a licensed mental health therapist as well as an addictions counselor here in the state of Maryland. Our program is one of 4 that we offer within the Veteran Services Center out of Sheppard Pratt. The other programs include our supportive services for veterans and families, which includes a shallow subsidy program and health navigation. They basically deal with preventing homeless prevention for veterans and then also helping to get homeless veterans housed. We have a homeless veteran reintegration program, which is funded out of the Department of Labor. We help veterans with education and training, getting them employed. And then we have a grant per diem program, which is out of Washington County. It's a 25-bed transitional housing unit for male veterans. And so we're really, really proud about the work that we're doing within Sheppard Pratt and Veteran Services. We work very, very closely in collaboration with the VA. So for John and for Dr. Smith-Benson, definitely appreciate being here with you guys.
You're getting a virtual round of applause as well, virtually right now. I wish I had like my horn like I was DJing. I'm like, bah, 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 bah. No horns tonight. Last but certainly not least, John Hollands. I hope I said your name correct. John Hollands?
Yes, sir. You got it right.
John Hollands, welcome to tonight's Minorities in Mental Health, caring for our veterans with PTSD program. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
But at first, I want to say thank you very much for having me. This is an honor, and it's nice to be with my two esteemed guests as well. Thank you. My name's John Hollands. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I served 7 years in the Marine Corps in the first Gulf War, particularly. Then 4 years in the Army National Guard. Achieved the rank of sergeant. I'm still a sergeant, I suppose. And I currently, and have done for the last 12 years, worked with the VA Maryland healthcare system on the suicide prevention team as a peer support specialist as well. Prior to that, I did work in the trauma treatment program for PTSD. So, and I have also lived with diagnoses, and you're right, we do recover. We can recover.
Yes, we do.
Thank you very much. But thank you. Appreciate it.
You get a virtual round of applause too, John. Give virtual. I'm doing like my virtual snap applause.
Thank you.
But once again, let's start the conversation. And this question is for Dr. Paula or John. How did you know, or what was the first sign to know that something was wrong? Whoever wants to start.
Well, John, would you like me to go first?
Hey, either way, it's fine.
Okay, I'll jump right in. This is a really, really good question, and thank you for bringing this forward. And I want to just say that for me, with the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what PTSD stands for me, it is, and for many, it is a whole body experience. So the very first things that I started to notice was some cognitive difficulties with memory, difficulties with concentration. I even had some trouble sleeping. Those were the first symptoms. So I went into the primary care provider thinking something was going on neurologically. MRI, CAT scan, all types of workups were done, and all of those tests were negative. So going down the list of differential diagnoses, they said, well, all of the tests have come back negative. We would just suggest that you go over to the mental health clinic so that they can do a comprehensive assessment and evaluation. And that's how I found out. So thank you for that question, because oftentimes things may show up in our bodies. Our bodies keep the score of all of the things that we've experienced. So it's mind, it's body. So thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely. And then John, same question. At what point did you realize something's not right, and I think I need to start, seeking some professional help?
That's a really good question, actually, and thank you very much, Dr. Paula Smith-Benson. And mine was a little bit different. I know that I had issues in hindsight, because at the time I didn't have a problem. That was kind of my mentality. Although things were going wrong, I was having emotional upsets, getting angry, that sort of thing. I've been married 3 times. There were certainly indications, but it really wasn't until I actually got into treatment, and then I finally accepted that I had the diagnosis. And an odd thing about PTSD is that it can be a disease of denial, like so many other mental health, difficulties. So for me, it was my third wife telling me, you're out of the house until you get some treatment from the VA. That's pretty much when I started to realize I had that problem. But I had carried that around for a number of years, and just, I'm fine. I'll be fine, like a lot of veterans do. And thank God that did change. But if I look back at it, I was suffering probably just a couple of years after I got out of the service. I was having difficulties. I was having nightmares. I was not being able to sleep. But like I said, I brushed it off like a lot of folks do. So I hope that answers the question well, and thank you for asking.
Absolutely. And I'm kind of this kind of segues into Joyce King. How often do you hear that? As a person who helps people deal with stuff like this, how often do you hear, I just knew I was okay. I thought I was having a bad day or a bad month, before they realized that, this bad day is just not a bad day. Because I tell people all the time, it's an illness, and if you don't treat the illness like any illness, it takes over your life, takes over your mind, takes over your body, and I always say it can literally kill you. The same way that any other disease can.
Right.
How often do you hear people come to you, before they get the help, saying same thing, I'm fine?
Yeah, I think probably 9 times out of 10, right? Especially within the veterans population, we're trained to be strong. We're trained not to display weakness. We're trained to be, vigilant and persevere. And ignore the stuff that's not good. Denial is a defense mechanism. I had a colleague years ago when I first came into the field that had an acronym for denial. Don't even know I'm lying. We don't even know. We don't even know that we're lying to ourselves. Because we convince ourselves that everything is okay. But it's the same thing from a mental health perspective as well as a physical health perspective. We will ignore the signs. We will ignore things until we just can't ignore them anymore.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you why this conversation is so important. I believe that I think over the last few years, we're talking a lot more about mental health. I can remember as a kid growing up, my dad was in the service and a lot of my family members were in the service. And, you would just hear stuff like, he just crazy. Well, that's my crazy aunt. Don't mind her. Not knowing that, that was our way of taboo, not wanting to talk about it. And I really give all three of you kudos just for not talking about it, but doing something about it. I think my next question, and anybody can answer this question. When you realize if there's someone watching right now, and they realize something's not right, and they want to get the help, but they're embarrassed because of the stigma that if mental health, you're crazy. Like, what would you say to them and really encourage them to, one, you're not crazy, and two, this is something that could push you to really get started today? Anybody want to
jump in? Yeah, I'll jump in. I think one of the first, maybe more private ways in which they can address, or at least start the process of addressing, is through warn lines for the counties, the crisis lines for the counties, or the national crisis lines as well. There are trained professionals on the other end of those phone lines. And so having that conversation that says, look, I think something may be going on, but I'm too embarrassed to talk to my primary care doctor. I don't know where to begin when it comes to mental health, and whether I'm going to have to pay it out of pocket or if my health insurance will cover it. So many questions for individuals. And so I would suggest starting there. That would be a good place to get that reception and then get some information. 211 also is a good resource for folks too, just to begin to make that first step, which is oftentimes the hardest step to make. That very, very first step to says, okay, let me go ahead and do this. Let me make this phone call so that I can then begin this self-care journey. And so, I would suggest that you start there.
Anybody want to piggyback before we go next one?
Yeah, thank you, Joyce. Thank you so much for lifting that up in the conversation. I just want to add, here in Baltimore, recovery here is an absolute movement, and we're really leading the way in a lot of efforts. So if you're in the Baltimore City area, the Enoch Pratt Library is working in partnership with the Maryland Peer Advisory Council. And in many of the branches of the library, there are peer navigators in the library. So there are lawyers in the library. There are other professionals that come into the library to provide services, because we're talking about communities being transformed. We're talking about social change from a micro to a macro level. So going into the library is the perfect opportunity. There's no stigma attached to going in for a resource, for a book. And that may be a great way to have a conversation. So I just like to lift up that program and lift up the work that's being done by the Maryland Peer Advisory Council.
Absolutely. If anybody's just tuning into tonight's program, Minorities and Mental Health, caring for our veterans with PTSD. Once again, this is not just for veterans. Of course, we're focused on that now, but I really want you encourage you to share this, because I want to get as many people watching this program as possible tonight. I'm gonna go back to John for a second, because something you said was very interesting. You said, I didn't realize I needed to get help until I was with my third wife, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times, what I tell people, as someone who deals with someone who deals with mental health issues, a lot of times we don't realize the toll it takes on our spouse or our significant other or our family. Do you honestly believe, that what you were going through mentally, really hurt your relationships, your first two?
I have to say, unfortunately, yes, absolutely.
Right.
I was.
You don't say unfortunately, but this is a real
now it's fortunate, right?
Right.
Pardon me, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, it is in a sense fortunate now, but at the time it certainly didn't feel that way. So I apologize. But yeah, and I can remember my first wife when I came back from the first Gulf War. Within the first year, I just didn't know how to communicate. And I was quick to anger, very frustrated, and that just made me feel worse because I wasn't sure why I was being that way. I hadn't been like that before, and that guilt, if you will, sort of makes it harder to communicate honestly. And a gentleman told me once, a psychologist I worked with told me once that PTSD is a disease an illness or a difficulty where avoidance is, we become masters of avoidance. So I'm going to avoid anything uncomfortable, anything that reminds me, those sorts of things. And so if something does upset me, I'm not going to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. And that really obviously can stifle a relationship, especially after a long separation. So yeah, it certainly contributed to those things and other things that were going on in my life as well with coworkers and things of that nature. If I had a bad day, I didn't realize that I was suffering from a trigger that was from an anniversary that I hadn't even consciously realized was an anniversary of something that had happened, right? That had hurt me, right? So I didn't understand myself well enough to explain it to anybody. So how could they possibly understand me? And then I would take that subconsciously, and then feel bad, treat myself badly, and so on. And that's sort of how things got worse.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it certainly was part of that problem. I would agree with that.
Dr. Paula, do you think the same for yourself as far as when you're diagnosed with PTSD? It takes a toll on your relationships with your family and your closest ones?
Absolutely. And I would like to just take this opportunity to talk about maternal mental health, and that things can happen during the pregnancy, things can happen in the postpartum period that interfere with bonding, with attachment. So for me, as a mother, I was affected and impacted. And when I started noticing that things did not seem the same from the first child, my daughter Kendall, to my son Chandler, I'm going to be honest with y'all, I was afraid that somebody was going to take my children. So even seeking help, I had to weigh, do I go in? Am I going to be transparent, vulnerable, let somebody know that I'm struggling, or are they going to take my babies? So in addition to what John is saying, a shout out to all the moms out there that are parenting with a mental health challenge and trying to raise their children. And my children are still impacted to this day. And I have to own all of my stuff. I have to take responsibility for my actions and inactions. We have to have those really hard conversations. And I show up for them and I tell them, I'm here now. I can't go back. Please forgive me. I can't go back, but I'm here now and we can move forward. So we're healing together, but we had to kind of start from ground zero. I was physically present, but as John was saying, with this PTSD, there was an aspect of me where I just wasn't connecting. Right. So the bonding, all of that was impacted. I would love to hear what Joyce can add to this conversation.
Absolutely, Joyce, please.
Yeah, I think so I'm thinking about, military versus the general population. So I happen to be a 4 Charlie. So I worked in psych in the Air Force. So and so in psych, we did a lot of prevention, a lot of stuff like that, education and training. We were big on that. However, if you present it in a way that maybe question your worldwide qualification, your ability to stay in the Air Force or stay in the service and then function at a capacity where your unit and your command can depend on you, they would send you to psych and have a commander directed evaluation done. And so battery of psych testing and everything completed and all these different things. All it takes is 1 or 2 instances where airman, soldier, Marine, sailor goes into behavioral health and has this testing done. And then next, they're separated out of the military. We send them home, in essence. And so that then spins the narrative within the units, the squadrons within the flights that this is not trustworthy. You cannot then present in a very vulnerable way because this may happen. So then I'm thinking about like the general population and those mothers, Dr. Smith-Benson, that you brought up, that may come in and they are concerned about, if I share too much with you as a therapist or as a psychiatrist or psychiatric nurse practitioner, or even primary care doctor, if I share too much information with you, will you then call Department of Social Services? Because we're all now mandatory reporters. And so we have to then make reports, or else our license, and our practices or whatever could potentially be in jeopardy. So you have this narrative that says, hey, come, present if you're having some challenges. But at the same time, if you present, you might then have other challenges that will come as a result of it. And so we really have to begin to work on that narrative and just making sure that it's a safe space and place for people to come when they need it.
Here's my question, and once again, how do we, because I know when it comes to your primary care doctor, you have the confidentiality agreement, stuff like that, where we can't share certain stuff. How does that work? Because like right now, I didn't serve in the military, but just listen to your conversation. If I was a person in the military right now dealing with PTSD, you just made me afraid to come forward. Because now I'm like, you know what? I need my job. I need this. I need my benefits. I need all this. So, how do we encourage that person that's watching right now? Because now we know that legally, if the person that I'm sharing this with, they don't share, they could lose their license. How do we have any ideas? Anybody can speak on this. How do we now, change the narrative for that person watching right now who really is dealing with PTSD, but now because right this second they were about to come forward, and now we just scared them away?
Okay, so let me answer that, because I don't want that to happen, right? And so it was really more speaking to the reasons as to why people may not necessarily come forward. But we have to understand that as we're reducing the stigma associated with mental health or addictions, and we're working really, really hard, we're making some inroads in that space. The systems now are working to also create a place where people can come and they don't necessarily have to lose their top secret clearances, or they don't lose their jobs per se. In terms of healthcare, whether you go to your dentist, the OBGYN or whatever, everybody's asking you, have you felt depressed, in the last 2 weeks or so, whatever. You're thinking, what does this have to do with my teeth cleaning? But it's important that we are talking more about it, and we're creating a space where we never know who's going to be that person that's going to plant that seed, that's going to be that light that causes a person to say, okay, now it's my time. And so the systems are changing, processes are changing, programs are changing. There's more collaboration that's going on. And so that mindset of nowhere is safe, we're changing that, or we're working to change it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't mind me saying so, thank you. And thank you very much, Joyce. There are also certain things that I've noticed with trauma treatment, at least for veterans, the practitioners or the clinicians that I was working with, I was able to then access my chart, which is something you can do at the VA. And I could see what they were actually writing about our appointments when I was working through my index trauma and so forth. And my big worry was that that information was going to get out to DOD, and then I was going to be in trouble or something, because things happened that were questionable. So I was very afraid for a very long time about talking about it honestly. And what I found was that my clinician, and this is anecdotal, but I find this is pretty much the rule, they don't write the details in your chart. That stuff is pretty much kept. They write the overview, and you deal with the details one-on-one in the discussion. And I didn't understand that until I actually got involved in it. And I was like, okay, so they're not writing the whole narrative down for somebody else somewhere in the government to see. And I know in this part of the country, we have a lot of people with clearances that come out of the military and work for contractors or the government, and they worry about that. Another thing I'll just put a quick push in for is vet centers. If you can, and if you're eligible for a vet center, they have a firewall. The VA cannot see your vet center chart, but the vet center can see your VA chart. So if you're concerned about somebody in your command or your job situation seeing something, vet centers are a good way to keep that more private than normal. So that's something I do want to pass on. There are options where it can make people feel a lot more comfortable. But again, that avoidance thing, be careful, because a lot of times I'll find anything to prevent me from getting the help or talking to somebody. And that's tough. That's a leap, kind of a leap of faith. My leap of faith was desperation, really, in a lot of ways, but it worked. So either way, that's what I would also recommend to folks. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
you want to
you
say,
so
Dr. Paula?
Yes,
Pardon?
I just wanted to thank
Yeah,
you.
please.
That was thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Joyce. I just wanted to add that I think just us being here tonight is an example of how the recovery movement is moving forward. The fact that John and I, folks with lived experiences, are now a part of the healthcare team. We are a part of the integrated team. So, having peer specialists on the team, someone with lived experience that can be a literal example. This is what hope looks like. This is what recovery looks like. This is what post traumatic stress looks like. But having those real conversations with a peer, with a comrade, with a colleague. And peers are everywhere. We're not just in the VA. So I think that there is a huge push in the right direction, because now we've got recovery oriented spaces. Language is very, very important. If you notice, John and I's language is very intentional, very strategic. We're talking about a mental health challenge. Why do I frame it that way? Because challenges can be overcome.
Absolutely.
Language matters.
Language
So
matters.
even that, breaks down that stigma.
And we have a question from the studio audience. And before I get to that question, how important, and once again, anybody can answer these questions, how important is, if I have a significant other and I'm dealing with PTSD, right? Do you suggest us going to get help together? Is that a suggestion? Do you suggest your husband, wife, or whoever your person is right now? If my person is dealing with PTSD and they just are coming home from the military, should we seek help together? Would that help us get through this? Or do you recommend I get the help I need first before I try to have a couples therapy type of thing?
Okay, so I'll jump on that. So it really depends. It's not necessarily a one size fits all approach. I think I would recommend that the individual seek out services themselves first, because they need to fully understand. John was talking about, like, he just didn't know what was going on. So therefore he could not communicate that with anyone else. And so we want to make sure that we're putting words and the appropriate language to what the experiences are, so that then they can then communicate that to their spouse, or at least be able to relate what their needs are. It may also be appropriate then for that spouse to seek out their own individual services in tandem, while the veteran or the individual who may be experiencing PTSD or any other mental health phenomenon for that matter, it might be important for the spouse to go and just be able to process in a safe space what they're going through and what they're experiencing, and getting some support there, as opposed to advice from grandma, mom, sister, friend, or whatever the case may be, which sometimes can be, let's just admit, acknowledge the fact that maybe not so good,
Sometimes, most times.
Less than helpful.
Let's be honest here tonight.
Yes. But, but again, we have to, they love us, right? They're biased and they're trying to figure out how to help us, and it usually isn't helpful. But so it might be appropriate in that respect or whatever to do it. NAMI has a number of programs that are available for family members of individuals suffering from, different mental health illnesses or phenomenon. They have different groups and different things of that nature, or whatever that could be free for individuals as well. But yeah, it may not be necessary that once they seek out their own individual services, they may not even need to do, couples work, but they may need to. The last part I want to just talk about, or whatever, I believe Dr. Smith-Benson brought it up. No, I think it was maybe John, I'm sorry, about attachment, like who we attach ourselves to. And when we go into relationships and all that or whatever, that initial attachment, we think, oh, I love you. You're so nice. You're so kind. But the reality of it is that it's deep rooted. It's a lot deeper than what we're seeing on the surface. And so depending on when the mental health phenomenon occurred and started will determine exactly why we attach ourselves to the people that we attach ourselves to. So it's important for us to understand and recognize that.
Absolutely.
Somebody want to piggyback before we go to this question from the studio audience? This is actually a great question, by the way, too. And this question is coming from Ayana Coleman, whoever you are. Thank you for asking this amazing question. The question is, and I quote, how can women help break down the conditioning that men feel they cannot express how they feel or what it is going on in their minds without feeling overbearing? You want to answer that one, John? You want to start with John?
If you don't mind, that's a very, very compelling question. Thank you very much. If I was to, and I don't want to sound glib about this, but it seems to me that the thing that helped me the most was my third wife, who I'm still with. We've been together 24 years, and thank God for her. She's fantastic, most patient and loving person I've ever met, and I definitely put her through the ringer. But I started opening up to her and telling her how I was feeling when she started being more gentle, if you will. She would say, look, I know something's going on with you, and I know you're not ready to talk about it, but when you are, I am ready to hear it. That kind of attitude. So I was very, very fortunate. Hopefully, that's not an uncommon thing, but that really made the difference, because then I felt safe. And it really is a matter of safety in a lot of ways. Help your spouse, your loved one, your partner feel safe in your company so that they can speak. And it's hard, because if I've been wounded by my partner's behavior, it's going to be a little hard for me to be like, okay, now I'm going to sit quietly and patiently and listen to what's going on with you. That you want to work through those things and really try as much as possible not to come back from a place of anger or revenge or, you hurt me too. But then again, the individual, me, for example, had to come to her or him or whoever and say, look, I know, like you were saying, Dr. Paula Smith, I made mistakes, and I need to sit here and listen, and I owe you for that. And I didn't mean that. I wish I hadn't, but I have to. So it's really sort of a partnership. But what I find is, for the person on the other side, and in this case, she asked about the wife or the female, men can be a real pain in the ass. And having a little bit of, you know what, I promise you, I'll do my best to let you speak. And let's make an agreement. Like actually literally talking about the specifics of the conversation has sometimes really made a difference. Like, this is what we're going to talk about. And if it gets like this, then we'll take a break. Actually laying that out, that seems to have helped in a lot of ways, rather than just going off a gut and feeling, which is what I always did before, which can really lead to trouble, of course, because I wasn't in a good mood, to say the least. And like I said, I didn't mean to be glib, but that seemed to make a difference, was to let her be gentle, quiet, calm, and listening, and let her be that way, and understand this is a deal. We need to work together. We want to stay together. I love you. Let's see what we can do to make this work. I sound silly, but that's really kind of what happened with me. And I'm very, like I said, very grateful. I hope that was helpful.
And make it very clear, you don't sound silly at all. I think this information and these questions, and thanks again to Ayana Coleman, who asked us questions from the studio audience. These are the real questions that people want to know. And just to kind of piggyback off this question, just for the two ladies as well, I know this question was kind of geared towards women helping men, but let's just flip it the same thing, because like I said, y'all are ladies who serve the military. And right now, if I'm your spouse, how do I not feel overbearing? Because I know you've been through a lot, mentally, physically, and I want to be that supportive husband, or I want to be a supportive person, because I always say, at least in my world, men were always taught to, if your lady or spouse has a problem, help them fix it. But a lot of times with this, I can't help but fix it. So what do I do right now? What do I do right now when I realize my person is going through this, and as a man, I'm taught to fix it.
I think arming yourself with knowledge is going to be the most important thing as well. I do have men on my caseload who are supporting spouses who are suffering from mental illness, some acute, some chronic, and men are known to want to fix problems. We don't always like that as women. Sometimes we just want you to listen, not fix. But nevertheless, so the first thing is going to be just, again, information is going to be key. What's happening, what's going on, what am I seeing, in my spouse and my mate? And then asking, because women are great at, we already have analyzed and whatever, and we know for the most part what our needs are, whatever. So if you ask me, hey, what do you need from me in this moment? How can I help you in that moment? I love it when my husband says to me, when he can see that I'm having a very stressful, overwhelming day, hey, Joyce, how can I help you in this moment? I'm like, oh my God, you don't do anything, but this is so great that you asked, it's like, it's amazing, versus, but then we've also been married over 20 years or whatever, versus the first 5 years of our marriage where he just walked by me, and it's like, I'm over here drowning, I'm suffering, but nevertheless. So yeah, I think it is important to just arm yourself with information and then just ask from a male's perspective, to the female. The reverse, in terms of Ms. Coleman's question, I agree with John completely. You create a safe space, especially African-American women. We can be a little curt. We have no cut cards sometimes. And our words can be sharp and they can be piercing. And so, no one is going to come and be vulnerable, with us if they're thinking that we're going to take that information and then turn it against them. And so, that safe space is paramount.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. I just want to add just one thing that came to my mind is that for the spouse, check in, turn within, manage your own stuff. Make sure that you're able to hold space, because honestly, sometimes are better than others in terms of communicating. So maybe if I'm just coming in from work, maybe that's not the best time, but just being able to check in and turn within. Can I hold the space? How long can I listen? Can I actively listen? And for how long? And then communicate that, or set up an environment where if I say now is not a good time, I really want to hear you so I can understand, but I may just need a few minutes. So making sure that spouse is practicing good self-care, has good insight, and then gets the support that they need, whether it be clergy, whether it be community, family. And NAMI, thank you for bringing that in, Joyce. But I think that's what's really important. Sometimes we're just not at capacity. Maybe we feel obligated. But for me, I would appreciate if the partner said, I'm not at, I can't do it in this moment.
Right. Hey, Joyce, what was that question you said your husband asked you that made you smile? Because I want to ask my wife that question. She's having a bad day. I got to write that down, because when if y'all saw her reaction, he said, when he asked me, I said, yay!
Yes.
What's the question?
It's what can I do for you in this moment? It's just
what can I do for you in this moment?
Okay. I love it.
I'm putting that in my notes right now, so just don't mind me if I'm on the radio tomorrow. I'm telling all the fellas, look, fellas, when you go home, tell your lady, what can I do for you in this moment? Like that, fellas. Yeah, fellas. It works for Joyce. She said it's going to work. We're good.
Don't overuse it. Don't overuse it.
John, right, John.
I know.
Right, John. Right. And don't be manipulative. Be genuine with it.
Yeah.
Be real, right? Really mean it. And I think that's probably more so than the words. It's the fact that he really means it in that moment. Like he really wants to do something makes me feel better, to make me feel better or whatever. And that means the world.
I love it.
I shouldn't be smiling and laughing when I ask.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe
I'm
not.
Don't mind me, y'all. But once again, man, we just tuning in. Of course, it's all about minorities and mental health, caring for our veterans with PTSD. If you need help, our crisis hotline is 988. Press the option 1. Once again, 988. Press the option 1. And this is so important to always say. I never say get the help you need. I say get the help you deserve. You deserve the help. One thing that you said, doctors, is words matter and how we say things. When you tell someone, get something that you deserve more than what you need, sometimes they are more reluctant to ask, you know what? I do deserve to feel okay. I do deserve to heal. Right. So you want to say something, John?
Yeah, I'm just saying that is so true. And I kind of remember when I realized that, maybe I don't deserve a lot because I was pretty down on myself at the time, but I do deserve to have a decent afternoon once in a while. I do deserve, to be nice to myself for once. And that's something I think one of the worst things about having PTSD and it not being treated was how hard on myself I constantly was. I was my worst enemy. And if I had been a friend, I'd have told me to go away because I was not nice the way I talked to myself, the things I said in my head to myself. Really give myself a break every now and then. I'm doing the best I can really make a difference. And I think that's important to remember, very important to remember, especially with PTSD.
Absolutely. Another question, and once again, anybody can answer these questions. Right now, for the person who believes that I can mask my PTSD, they might have just got on and missed some of these questions earlier. But unfortunately, let's just be very honest. A lot of us, we mask what we're going through mentally, by using drugs, by drinking too much, by overeating too much, by, so many vices that we know can affect your health in a whole nother direction outside of mentally. For that person that believes that I can just mask my way out of this, I'm not going to get help because one, I don't believe in therapy because I've heard it before. I don't believe that somebody can tell me how to fix myself. What do they know? What would you say to that person right now who believes that, therapy does not work? And as long as I'm doing these drugs and doing this alcohol or doing whatever I'm doing, I feel fine when I'm high. I feel fine when I'm drunk. What do you say to them? Anybody can answer.
I would say that true, therapy is not for everyone. However, for those who if you give it an opportunity or whatever, and it is appropriate, it does work. It does help. I think it's always managing our expectations. It's if I take a pill for antidepressant or depression or for anxiety or whatever, what are my expectations and do I have on that particular medication? It's the same thing on therapy. Therapy is work, right? Like it's not you coming to me and I say, oh, you give me a list of your issues or whatever, and then one by one I tell you what to do. That's not how it is. It's a partnership. It's a collaboration. And so together we work to determine exactly, what's the best course of action. Right. What adjustments, what changes need to be made? What do we need to implement? What do we need to remove and whatnot? For a lot of folks who are coping by the use of substance, illicit substance, mood altering substance and whatnot, been in rehab for a while, worked in that space for a while, and that is exhausting eventually for a lot of folks or whatever, because that disease takes over. They no longer have control over it. And so now, the use is really just maintenance. It's staving away withdrawal and everything else or whatever. And that's just a really miserable life. So what I would say to someone is you deserve it. And then there is hope because things can improve. Things can get better, And so what we do deserve is a good quality of life. We're going to be here. Let's be here. Let's be in it to win it, and get what we can out of it and really begin to really enjoy our lives. Healthy people make healthy families, which then in turn makes healthy communities, So we all win when we're all at our healthiest.
I'm sorry, DJ Quicksilver.
I'll say anybody. I'll say
okay. Yeah, thank you for saying that, Joyce, because we are a system. We're all interconnected. We're all in this, together. And in terms of the mask, what I will say about that is the good news is things that we've learned can be unlearned. And many of us have learned down through the generations to mask things, particularly in the military. And Joyce was referring to that earlier in the discussion, that soldiering on, that not being fit for duty, and these other labels and things that the person may have to kind of deal with. What I love about the behavioral health space is options, options, options. There are so many different options in terms of the type of professional you could see, in terms of the treatment modality, whether it's inpatient, whether you do it individually, whether you meet in a group setting. Perhaps you're an outdoors person, and there's even something called equine assisted therapy, where you can work with horses, and there's other ways, other integrative ways to approach this. And that's what is so great about where we are in time. There are many more options than we've ever had before. So it's not a one size fits all. So I would encourage the person to just keep themselves open, and receptive to ideas. And this process of recovery does not go in a straight line. It's not like if I have high blood pressure, I take my medication and my blood pressure goes down. This is ups and downs. It's not in a straight line. It may go in a spiral. Things may go backwards, but it's okay to not be okay. It's all right to not be all right. And again, options, options, options. And I want to say that we were remiss in explaining that NAMI stands for the National Alliance on Mental Health. So just so that we use the acronym, I just want to make sure we put that out there.
Thank you so much for clearing that up. Speaking of, where we are in today's society, of course, we don't have to talk politics, but we come up with an election year. And my question is, with PTSD, unfortunately, for some people and a lot of people, it leads to suicide. What role does policy and legislation play in addressing these veteran suicides? And if anybody knows, are there any recent or proposed changes that could impact this issue?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Do you want to go ahead? Yeah, what I do know is,
go ahead, John.
The more resources, the more we can do. If I may, a little bit with the VA, we could use more employees, more people actually working on the problems that veterans have. It's not a complaint. I don't want to talk out of school or lose my job, but right. From that perspective, we need to dedicate more, and not just to the VA and the federal services, but also to the communities and otherwise. And paying more attention to actually the cause of veterans, and not just veterans, but PTSD is a real problem throughout this, especially in Baltimore City, for everybody. So that's something I think we need to pay more attention to, and that is in terms of mental health. That'd be my opinion. That's something we need to focus more on, because we got to get rid of the stigma, get people feeling comfortable at talking about it and getting the help. And then the help has to be available when they get there. And I've seen sometimes where a person will get ready and they're ready and it's hard to find the help. So that's my feeling on that, if you don't mind me saying so.
Absolutely, John.
Thank you.
Joyce, Dr. Paula, want to jump in?
Yeah, I think that I'm so happy, very glad to meet you, Joyce. I hope we can continue to stay in touch. I think this is clearly the way ahead. Collaboration and community partnerships are critical. On average, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the healthcare system, only about 30 to 40% of all veterans seek care at the VA. So we must work together in collaboration, because we're talking about 60 to 70% of the veterans that are showing up in community organizations.
Right.
So we cannot work in silos. We have to partner. We have to leverage our strengths and continue to move forward as one unit. So that's what I'd like to add. And I'm really excited that we're here with Sheppard Pratt today. And this is an example of community partnerships and collaboration.
Right.
And that's you want to add something?
So the only piece I would like to add, though, is just more often than not, I have a lot of colleagues now who are stepping away from accepting insurance. And so there's a lot of...
Why is that? I'm going to cut you off, but why are they doing that?
Because of the reimbursement rates, the justifications to get reimbursement, the claims paid, the timeliness of it. It's just a bureaucratic process that makes it so hard and convoluted, and so we don't do this work because we're trying to get rich. We're not doing this work or whatever to get paid. We're getting paid for our time. That's it, but we're doing this work because we care. We really want to, be a difference maker, in the communities and with individual lives. But when there's a lot of red tape that you have to go through in order to, get your claims submitted and or paid, it just becomes difficult. Policies and different things or whatever that have affected the Affordable Care Act, things that affect Medicaid and Medicare, and just all of those things when it comes to health insurance, that makes it really, really challenging for individuals to actually utilize their health insurance so that they can then go and receive the services that they need. Is a really, really, really big challenge and whatnot. And I think that definitely has to be paid attention to, like and we're doing it in terms of the mental health reform, but there's still more work to be done in that space, where anyone, I mean, my colleagues and I, we talk about this all the time, anyone that has a mental illness or an addiction that just needs services, they should just be able to walk in somewhere in their community nearby and just get that care, because it's really, really hard for them to make that step. And it's not, they have to jump through so many different hoops in order to get to the therapist. And oftentimes the therapists don't stay because of other things or whatever. And then they're switching therapists often. It's just a lot of things that are happening in that space or whatever, that I think that we can do in terms of governmental policies and everything that could support ensuring access to care for all Americans who need behavioral health services.
Absolutely. We have about 10 minutes left. If there's anybody that's still watching the audience with like one or two more questions, feel free to, type them in the comment section. We'll get them up on the right side of the screen. I can ask those questions. But for the last few minutes, if any of y'all, if there's anything that we did not touch on that you believe that's of importance that people should know and see tonight, feel free to jump in now and please address that or put it out there.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to add a little bit to what you were talking about with the using substances to help cope. I was told by a guy many years ago, actually, he said, PTSD doesn't get better on its own. In fact, it gets worse over time. And it's sad what it leads to. Suicide, other things, terrible things. And addiction in and of itself is a whole nother issue. Mm-hmm. I had both on top of each other. There comes a time when the drinks stop working. There comes a time when the drug stops working, but I can't put them down. And now I got that and PTSD. And it just, if you can avoid that at all, I would recommend it as much as possible, of course. But it seemed to me the only thing was to get to the root of the matter and get somebody who really knew what they were doing and cared to help me. And I was very fortunate to find that where I did find it, and it did make a difference, and I was able to do that. But I know from both sides of that coin that it's not going to get better that way, unfortunately. It may work for a while, but eventually that's going to come to call. So I just wanted to add that and make sure that's understood as well. I'm sure you guys understand.
No, I really, really give you, kudos, John, for being this open and vulnerable, because a lot of people, when they have overcome substance abuse or when they have overcome these things, they become embarrassed and I don't want to talk about it anymore. Not knowing that talking about it, you just being honest as you are, you just help somebody you might not even know it, because, these conversations are so warranted. But I always tell people a lot of times it's not the message, it's the messenger. Sometimes, me hearing this from a therapist who's never been, a substance abuser, right? What do you know about it? Like, so like when you hear from somebody who says, you know what, I didn't read this in the book. Not that I graduated. This is something that I really went through, and I'm trying to help you over it. A lot of times that resonates better than the person telling me what I think you should do, but you've never been through it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Anybody else, Dr. Paula or Joyce King? And do we miss anything? Because we got a few minutes left.
I want to talk a little bit about the clinical diagnostic criteria. So Dr. Smith-Benson and John have shared their stories in terms of their experiences with it. But I think it's going to be important for anybody who's watching or loved ones of folks that you might be questioning whether or not, PTSD is a thing and that can be something that you're dealing with. For our veterans, oftentimes it's associated with combat and their experiences with it. But we found, research shows that you could have two soldiers that go in and have the same exact experience, but they don't necessarily both come out with PTSD. And so, it is specific. But generally speaking, when we're talking about, a diagnostic criteria, we're looking at, if you're having an exaggerated startle response, hypervigilance, you're avoiding things, you're having some nightmares and some flashbacks. Also, there is this sense of, increased anxiety, this fear, this kind of innate kind of gut fear where you're not really sure where it's necessarily coming from. Again, for our veterans, it could come from a combat situation, or it could come from just witnessing something that's traumatic. It can come from car accidents. It can come from abuse, experiencing abuse of some sort, or having a near-death experience. And so it's going to be important that, there is a diagnostic criteria, but how that plays out in each person may vary. It may differ from person to person. So if you have some inclination or some questions as to whether or not this might be something you're going through, then I would definitely encourage, every person to get connected with a clinician and to get that assessment and evaluation done, because we do know how to treat PTSD. It is treatable. It responds very, very well to treatment. And left unattended, it can create other problems for us.
I really commend you and all the work that y'all doing over at Sheppard Pratt. And I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I'm gonna tell you what's so crazy. Like, and I'll be very open and honest, and hope I don't offend anybody with this. I remember as a kid, like, hearing about Sheppard Pratt, that we used to always joke about, that's just the place where the crazy people go, right? Like, that was the stigma in the 80s and 90s when you heard about, your cousin got sent to Sheppard Pratt. But now now as an adult, when you really research what the work that you guys have been doing, it really, it's amazing that, a lot of people who work there, like yourself, have really dedicated your lives to helping people really overcome a sickness or PTSD or whatever they're dealing with. So I just want to really commend, yourself and Sheppard Pratt for all the work that you've been doing.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't the only one as a kid to heard that Sheppard Pratt was for the crazy people, right?
Definitely.
They still say it.
They still say it.
They still say
I
it.
want to make sure I wasn't the only person that heard that as a kid.
No, you were not.
Okay. I figured this was a safe space. We can be honest.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely. But no, we got about like 3 minutes. Dr. Paula Smith-Benson, Joyce King, John Hollands, anything else you want to plug, please feel free to do so right now, please.
Yes, I want to just lift up just in our last few minutes again that the National Veterans Crisis Line is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is always someone there. The 988 line works for everyone, but particularly if you're a veteran, you can press option number 1. That is an opportunity where you can speak to someone. You don't have to have a thought of wanting to harm yourself. That's not the only reason why you can call. You can call at any time. If you have questions, if you need to speak with someone, if you have something that you're going through, just know that that service is available to you. If something is happening that you feel like you're considering thoughts of taking your life, please dial 911, go to your closest emergency department that can help you to evaluate you and get you to safety. And that's the one thing that I wanted to leave. And you are not alone. Absolutely. You're not alone.
Absolutely. And ditto on all of that. And you don't have to be in crisis, like you were saying, to call the Veterans Crisis Line. I know some veterans will wake up from a bad nightmare and call the crisis line, get a 10-minute talk, and it helps immensely. So don't wait until you're in crisis if you can help it. But thank you very much for saying that, Dr. Smith-Benson.
I have used the crisis line. Thank goodness for it. Yeah, I had to call, and they were right there for me. And they actually sent a lovely card, sort of like a week or so after, just kind of checking in. You called, we're just following up to make sure everything is okay. So if you need to call, please do so.
And thank you.
I'd like to go ahead and just plug in to our local mobile crisis teams. Yeah. And so they work in conjunction with 988 and the crisis lines and diversion lines and whatnot. And so some people being over the phone may seem a little impersonal or whatever, but if they need someone to come to them and speak with them or meet them in the community, then, many of the counties in the state have mobile crisis response teams. And these are all peers, mental health clinicians, nurses that are trained to go out in the community and help individuals in real time. And so that's another option for folks and everything as well, especially some of our geriatric and aging veterans. You can take advantage of the best of both worlds.
Definitely.
I just want to say in closing, man, I really, really appreciate virtually meeting all three of you all. Please continue the amazing work that you've been doing and that you're continuously doing right now. Once again, if anybody needs the help or deserves the help, please get the help you deserve. And once again, this was called Minorities in Mental Health, Caring for Our Veterans with PTSD. Of course, thanks again to the VA. Shout out to Sheppard Pratt, and to everybody who's been doing amazing work. Please keep it up, because I believe honestly in my heart that we saved a life tonight. We saved the life tonight of somebody who was not going to get help. We saved the life of somebody who probably, like you said, John, is thinking, this substance abuse is the way to mask it, and it is what it is. You being so open and honest about what you've been through and what you've overcome, all three of y'all have really helped me. Not just for at the beginning, for anybody that's dealing with anything, when it comes to mental health, depression, anxiety, whatever it is, please, I encourage you to get the help you deserve. And I think that's going to do it for us, man. If anybody wants to plug anything else, real quick, let me go and remind everybody to wake up with the Quicksilver Morning Show every morning, 6 to 10 a.m. on 92Q. And thanks for keeping my morning show #1. So I appreciate all of y'all who listen to us every morning on 92.3 and, of course, at quicksilvershow.com. But thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Amazing conversation tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep. And once again, don't forget the Veterans Crisis Hotline is 988, press option 1. And Sheppard Pratt, the website is shepherdpratt.org, I believe, correct? shepherdpratt.org. So if you need any help with anything, they're definitely here to help you out. And as I will say, Quicksilver, I thank y'all for tuning in tonight. I'll catch you guys tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. on the Quicksilver Morning Show. Have an amazing night and stay safe, everybody. Peace.
Good night.